What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Future Fight. So today I have a continuing sort of video that I want to talk about with it's kind of like a first impression of Doctor Strange, and I believe unfortunately that it somehow ties into the team up collection, and that's what I want to talk about. Okay, so let's go down the path that I'm trying to lead you. So we got the Doctor Strange uniform, and I think the expectation was that at least for myself, and I think probably many others, with the popularity of Doctor Strange, this should have been a surefire hit. You've got a uniform that would basically power up the character, especially through him receiving the T4, and that would make the character feel, you know, larger than life in terms of the blast mail type superhero type category. Unfortunately, what we've got, even if you haven't tier 4 Doctor Strange at this point, is somewhat of a letdown and a dud. I don't want to say somewhat, it is a letdown and a dud uniform. While the uniform shores up a lot of Doctor Strange's weaknesses in terms of his defense and his survivability, it doesn't really give him any boost in terms of his overall attack power, which is more important in this game than defense, right? So what do I mean by that? If you watch my patch details video when they released the patch, I was deeply concerned about the reductions that they gave to his innate skills. So like the characters basically get skill additions, like, you know, effects that they have, but every character, even if you go back to the beginning of the game, like, you know, 7-8 years ago, and you look at down here on the bottom, you see energy effects of energy damage. So it'll say physical attack of energy damage, or say energy attack or something like energy damage of this. Well, Doctor Strange's previous uniform, if you were to take a look at it, for instance, so this is his Multiverse of Madness, which you received like a year ago. If you were to look at the skills on these, specifically his 3, his 4, and his 5 skill, I pointed out inside that video that he essentially received slashes to his energy attack. So for instance, you can see here 139, 135, and then over here like 137 on his 2 skill, 105, and then 95%. It's also important to pay attention to the additional energy damage that's being done. You can see 427, 427, 641, 257, 214 on his skills, right? So some pretty good numbers overall in terms of that. Now when we go back to the uniforms and we look at this new Death of Doctor Strange uniform, you see somewhat of a downplay. So essentially you can see it's 100 still on his soul tier, but we go down to 80%, so a 20% reduction. We go to his 3, it's close to half in terms of that. Even the additional damage being dealt is really mitigated. We go over here and we've got essentially another half reduction, and then you get another additional half reduction with major drastic cuts of more than half in terms of additional energy damage dealt. So all of the improvements that you basically get from the increases in things like his energy attack being increased for his passive, his leadership being increased, or his passives, or even for instance the uniform effects that he has where he's getting guaranteed crit rates and his critical damage, they don't make a lot of sense anymore to you, because you start to look at them and you go, well, so he got 35% critical damage increase, and he got 25% increase in critical rate, and he got the skill damage increase and the bonus damage increase. But then what you're looking at that is you're trying to compare, well, if the base, the foundation is set lower, meaning, you know, if I started you out at 100 and then I gave you these increases, then that's more. But if you were already at 100 and I took away 50% from you, that doesn't make up for it, because I basically lost out on the numbers there. Like I'm at a net deficit instead of like at a net gross. Like that's basically the way it works. And so where he's at with this uniform, he's actually at a net deficit value, because they slashed his skill damage so much that now when you look at the skills overall, you're like, well, you're not dealing necessarily more damage than you were dealing before, because you only slashed them. There's not a gross effect here that's happening. Now, that talks about the character kit in of himself. But my concern specifically to this is how much of this is being done because of the new upgrade option in terms of team up collections. So when you jump inside team up collections, which is a terrible system in and of itself, Let's just lay that bare flat and we can talk about it. It'll be the continuing conversation around points inside the inside future videos that I make specifically to have to do with the Midnight Suns, X-Force, or the Sinister Six. So when you look at these right now, what you essentially have is the ability for your characters to achieve the levels where they can then receive increase all basic attack bonuses by 40% and increase their additional pierce damage by 10%. However, the only ways for you to actually earn these tokens, as we can currently see in game, is you have to do the level up challenges. I'm at level 9. I haven't spent any crystals. I haven't spent any real world money. I just played the game, got some leveling. I had to go back and do some leveling for like the Blade and Iron Fist and the Moon Knight uniforms that I had already purchased, so I didn't have to purchase any uniforms there. Matter of fact, one of the uniforms was a Moon Knight and it was a 500 gold uniform that I had to go back and purchase and then level those up with my resources that I already had. And of those, you get about 125 of these tokens here. And then in your applied effects, you can level up each of these and receive an additional 4 tokens per each of these that you level. So at 10 levels, generally there's about 3 of these. So 30, there's an additional 120 tokens within inside of this pool to be had. So probably somewhere anywhere from 200 to 250 tokens is what you're going to cap out on for what you can earn via this method of these tokens. Now I can tell you, for instance, this is as far as I have gotten with those tokens earned. So essentially I'm down at 75%. I failed at 75%. I also failed at 80%. So even if I had succeeded on those 2 levels where I failed, I essentially would be no further than this node right here. And I had originally thought maybe it was going to be something like, hey, we were at 100%, we were at 90, we were at 80, we were at 70, we were at 60, we were at 50, and then, you know, you start working your way down where it's just a 0.5% to get to this. But no. It started going down to like 75% where I'm already inside of here. So I'm already going to be looking at probably being below 40% in order to raise these levels, which means that even though I earn the tokens from this event, I'm going to probably more than likely have to find another way to get tokens in order to successfully raise up my levels so that way I can get these bonuses. So what essentially I'm looking at here, and I'm going to go back to Doctor Strange's uniform specifically, and I'm going to specifically call out his tier 4 when I look at this uniform skill. So if you look at Doctor Strange's tier 4 skill, it's very, very concerning. So inside of here, Doctor Strange's tier 4, it goes for an increase all basic attack 50% for 10 seconds. That's it. That's it. That's it. There's nothing else about the skill. There's no effect in terms of reflection and no buffs or anything like that. It's just a simple all basic attack increase by 50%. That's it. But guess what? You can get an increase all basic attack by just a simple frenzy buff. Matter of fact, if you were to look at his skills, on his 5th skill, he gets all basic attack by 60%. If you were to look at, you know, his some of his other skills as well, like his 4, he gets an increase all basic attack by 60%. So why am I getting a tier 4? And I think Cynic Alex pointed this out in some of his videos. He was like, the tier 4s have started to feel very lazy, right? Like I'm getting these tier 4 abilities, and they're basically tier 4 abilities that have mounted no more than additional, like an additional co-op button inside there. I get the effect of the striker that's coming in with their striker skill that they're applying, and that's it. And then I get the little buff that's over here, and they feel very, very lazy. And this one feels like the laziest. I mean, if I went back and I took a look at any of the characters that were recently released inside the game, a la, let's say, Odin, and I took a look at his like skill for his tier 4, you can see he's receiving immunity to all debuffs, increase all basic attacks. He even has a heal on his skill. So there's a lot there going on for the character. I can look at Adam Warlock, who is the who would be the competitor for Doctor Strange in almost every way, and I can say, hey, I can look at his skill effects inside of here, and for his tier 4, where is his tier 4? And on his tier 4, he receives all basic attacks by 90%. He gets decreases damage received from reflected attacks. He also reflects all attacks for 3 seconds on release of his tier 4. So there's a whole lot going on for the character. So you have to start to wonder then, why have they done this to Doctor Strange? Did they release the character intentionally this way, or was it a bug? My only thought for why they intentionally released the character this way is because you know that he's getting the buff from the Team Up collection, because he potentially has the ability to cap out on pierce damage and get the buff for the 10% pierce damage. He's also going to receive the all basic attack by 40 as well, because he's a Midnight Suns character. So you reduce the character and you slash him in half, so that way he's just mitigatingly stronger than other characters when those uniforms are released. What do I mean by that? So for instance, like let's use the Wakandans. That's going to be the best one, because it's a pointed concern about the way these team up collections are going to work in tandem with uniforms, for instance. So when Black Panther got released, we were automatically comparing him to the likes of Captain America and Moon Knight. He was slightly, if not equivalency, to a character like Moon Knight, right, in terms of his abilities and his skills and where he was going to be used and fit inside ABL and World Boss Legend, and his ability to clear content. Well, with the new addition of the Team Up collection, where he now will benefit from an additional 10% pierce damage and the 40% basic attack, that means when you start to look at his skills innately, because of that, anything that you look at on his skill has an additional 40% attack on those, right? So like this buff where we're increasing his basic damage by 60% for one attack, that's essentially 100% for one attack. You start to look at his you know, others like the increase all basic attack, where the frenzy buff and stuff starts to play into effect, and that's basically 90% all basic attack. You start to look at his striker skill, and he gets the recovery of 20% HP, he gets all speed, and he'll get an increase all basic attack for 110% basically inside the skill set now. So when you look at him now, because he has that additional 40% and the additional pierce damage, which means more of that damage is getting through, he kind of eclipses Black Panther at this point. So the question then becomes, and you can see how Moon Knight invalidates Black Panther's uniform and his placement in the meta, because now characters or players who are able to get this is going to go above and beyond players who have Black Panther in terms of achieving that. Now, I do have to point out that it is for a price, because if you look at this, I've used all the tokens that they've given me from here pretty much, and I'm not that far down on the wagon. The only way that you can conceivably get higher right now is if you go inside the shop and you purchase your way to the top of this chain and you get the 40% there. But it's having a negative impact, though, in my opinion, on the design choices of Doctor Strange specifically, and what it could mean for future characters. What I feel has happened is that NETMARBLE developers, knowing that they have introduced this new ability for characters like Doctor Strange to receive the 10% and the 40%, you've innately designed that into the character's uniform that you release. So it's not that he's going to necessarily receive the 40% and then he's going to be 40% better than all other characters who have similar like stats to him. It's that he's now set at somewhat the same bar, and you've baked that into the uniform, and it's really easy to see. And you can go watch a lot of the other videos, like, you know, Beast Mode talks about it. I know he's busy with the baby right now. Congratulations to Beast Mode on his the new addition to the family. You can look at Cynic Alex, free to play Adventures. I hadn't seen Forgo make a video yet, but if you look at the character overall and you compare it to his previous uniform in Multiverse of Madness, there's not improvements here. Free to play Adventures does a great job at pointing out previous uniforms and doing comparisons from previous uniforms to current uniforms, and there's not very much of a improvement for the character overall from this at all anyways. And I have to say, to be perfectly honest, for your most casual players, I don't think that it's going to be, you know, I'll have to do this when I do my video for Death of Doctor Strange. I don't think that this is going to be a character that most people are going to want to play, because his skill rotations and things like that, they require some skill and some timing. And I don't think that the majority of casual players are going to be able to execute the character. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying that as like a shot in the dark, but it's just the truth in my opinion. I mean, most people, you can jump inside Giant Boss Raid and see people have tier 4 Jean Greys but can't do more than 10% damage. So like, he's not a character that I would recommend to a casual player joining in the game right now and saying, hey, yeah, go get him. Because you look at his skill rotation and the way that they wanted you to use it on just the preview skills, and you're like, nah, most people are not going to get that down. They're not going to, they're just going to be button smashing, and they're not going to get the benefit of the kit overall, because there's some very big things that you have to do for it. But I really do feel like, so to wrap things up, this is where I want to go with this, is an understanding, right? Is that when I previously said this in older videos, where it's at certain points in the year, you can see where characters are released and they sort of set a bar for where the game is and where those characters could go. So you have like a baseline and the characters released, and then you can have some characters that are slightly above the bar, some characters at the bar, and some characters slightly below the bar, depending on what you're doing. Like for instance, for me, I felt like Black Bolt was last year that character that sort of set the bar, right? He was the bar for where, like, it was a seasonal uniform, granted, but he set a bar. Like, he's still a character of relevancy, and there's some characters that fit right at his level. There's some characters above his level, and there's some characters below his level. In January, we'll probably get that again, and then in July, we'll get that again. So like, we got that with the characters that were released in January, and we got that characters released in July, right? So Miles Morales, Ant-Man type characters, they were above and below the bar, right? This is the problem though, is that we have a set bar now, unless there's something bugged in the game, which there very well could be, or something bugged about his uniform. We have a character whose bar has been set not by just the uniform being released and it being better than the previous uniform that he had, but being influenced by the team up collection that is now giving him a boost that requires you to pay into the system in a complete pay to play environment. And the worst thing is that uniform being released now doesn't make it even just a uniform option that you just basically get the raw deal from. If you just say, hey, I just want to stay away from this system because this system is pay to play and I don't want to be engaged in it, and hey, you know what, it's going to take 2 years for me to max out this system with all the failure success rates inside of here, and I've got to spend crystals inside of here, I got to spend gold or real dollars in order to earn these tokens to do it. Meanwhile, in order to receive their intended value for the uniform for that character or the characters underneath the Midnight Suns banner, their intention is being that, well, we were giving him the 10% additional pierce damage and the 40% basic attack, so we didn't want him to be overpowered, so we tuned him down in terms of the uniform, and now I end up with a uniform that's not worth it to buy at all because it's not really better than the uniform that was there before. And even when I do finally get him all the way up with there, he might be just incrementally better than the Doctor Strange uniform. It's a terrible look. It's a terrible look. There's no way you're telling me that the current incarnation of this uniform is not influenced by that team up collection. And I think it's bad. It's a bad decision by the NETMARBLE devs. I'm starting to wonder how much of the team from the failed Marvel Future Revolution game came over to Marvel Future Fight and are starting to assist with their terrible ideas. Leave those guys behind and let them do what they're doing, because obviously they did not know what it took to be successful. They had a far greater processing and capabilities of what they could have did with that game than what was there for this game, and they failed. So I'm not really happy about the way that we're currently stance with like Doctor Strange. This uniform represents everything bad about where they could possibly be going with the game, and I don't know what to say more than that. Like, there's just no way that the team up collection hasn't influenced the build and the design changes on Doctor Strange for his skills to be cut by nearly half. So the basic attack is going to basically intended to make up for some of that inside of there, along with the additional pierce damage that's there. It's terrible. It would be different, in my opinion, if that was a free-to-play system and there were other ways to earn these tokens in-game. These challenges would rotate or something like that, so that way you can earn new tokens by, hey, I gotta go run and play Doctor Strange inside World Boss Legend and I earn 5 tokens, similar to the way the rotating stats happen for your shield the Shield Academy or something like that, if it was done with that, like, hey, go play, you know, world boss, world events, you know, so many times. But that's not the way it's being done, and it's clearly influenced the design on the uniforms. And I have this big fear that that's going to be the future of this game, that we're going to get churned out additional team up options. Certain characters will be left behind, specifically like if you look at like Black Bow, who just got his tier 4 and has been invalidated now by, you know, Moon Knight, because he gets the benefit. There's not enough characters inside the Wakanda, you know, banner for them to profit off of by just including them inside a team up collection. So why would you do it? I mean, at best you've got M'Baku, Black Panther, and Shuri, unless you decide to put Storm underneath that same banner, and then maybe Killmonger. But there's no other characters that you really put underneath the Wakanda banner inside of the entirety of the roster that's currently represented, because you missed out on the opportunities to put Nkoye, to put any of the characters that were there from, you know, the Wakanda Forever movie. Like, I mean, you're really like scratching to put people underneath the Wakanda Forever banner, and there are going to be other characters in this game that are going to, you know, fall to the same problem as well. So I don't like where we're headed with this. It's really bad. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know. Until next time, peace.